Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to This Week in Movies, a weekly podcast wherein I recap everything that's basically happening in the world of film, and I do it in a casual, unedited style, which really kind of promotes this kind of a discussion and makes the conversation a bit more fluid, if you will. Now, before I begin, if you want to skip ahead to any of the stories, look at the time codes on your screen, you can go ahead and do that. I had a couple of things to say. First off, this particular week didn't have an awful lot in terms of movie news up until a point, of course, whereas towards the end there were a few stories that really picked up that I can really go in depth with, but there aren't an awful lot of stories, well, of course, relative to earlier weeks. Furthermore, at the end of last week's show, I did a full spoilers review for X-Men Days of Future Past, which lasted about half an hour, which was far longer than I thought it would. And I intend on doing that either for a spoilers review for a film and really go in depth with it, or perhaps reviews or a discussion of certain films leading up to anything happening in the upcoming weeks. So if you have any recommendations of what you want me to really go in depth with next week, perhaps relating to an upcoming film or to a prior film or to some significant story where I can recap someone's filmography and whatnot, I definitely love to do that. And finally, the last thing I'd like to say before I get into the first story is that I've had about 525 subscribers. I know that it's not, every 25 subscribers is not necessarily a milestone, but considering the kind of slow burn that I've had, I think that lately it's started to pick up quite a bit, and I'm really happy about that. And finally, one quick shout out to J4 Gaming. He's really enthusiastic. He loves film. He's been commenting a lot. I love interacting with him. Definitely check out the channel J4 Gaming. Now, the first story, well, technically the first two stories that we have relate to Star Wars Episode VII. The first is that they have announced 2 new cast members, and for all those people that had an issue with the gender bias that some people thought that the casting had, or even the racial bias that some people thought that the casting had, that could be kind of diminished, at least by the next 2 names that we have, the first of which is Lupita Nyong'o. All of you know her from 12 Years a Slave. She just won an Academy Award. She was also in Nonstop, but really, I mean, not a lot of people would recognize her for that particular film. But her performance in 12 Years a Slave was fantastic, to say the least. And while we have no idea who she's going to play, what she's going to do, I'm basically here to speculate about some of that. And, well, some people have been saying that she could be a relative of Lando Calrissian. While I think that might not be the case, considering we're not even sure if Billy D. Williams is coming back so far, I actually get the impression that, if you visit the prequels or revisit the prequels, she has that kind of demeanor and that slightly more sophisticated manner about her in terms of her mannerisms and whatnot, and she could play some kind of a senator, if at all they have senators and whatnot in Star Wars Episode VII. We have no idea about what the plot is or about who any of the characters are, but she really has that sophisticated sense about her, and I think that a senator, if they were to introduce that political aspect within the Star Wars universe again, definitely seems possible. And another person that has been cast is Gwendoline Christie, who has a pretty decent role on Game of Thrones. She seems to be more in the action when it comes to Game of Thrones, so I'm definitely intrigued to see what she has to do. She's also in the upcoming, final 2 Hunger Games films, that is Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, and again, I don't know, I haven't seen her do much, but there is speculation about her role. There was a reported rumor, and this is a rumor, mind you, there's absolutely no confirmation about this, but the source of this particular rumor seems decently credible enough, and that is that there is information that her character is perhaps a stormtrooper that's defected from the Empire. Now, if this were true, It would be pretty interesting, well, of course, because it sounds like an interesting plot line to have a stormtrooper defect from the Empire, but at the same time, it feels like it's kind of negating certain things that occurred back in, Attack of the Clones and whatnot. So the thing is, while yes, J.J. Abrams is a fan and everyone's a fan who's working on the Star Wars Episode VII, of course, I don't want it to happen. Well, I mean, I don't think that they're going to let that happen, but I hope that they acknowledge what the prequels have set up for the future of the universe. Considering they want to make, a Boba Fett spinoff in the future. I mean, that's, again, the high rumor of what the possible spinoff will be. That I hope that whatever little bit of continuity that the prequels have literally created, I hope that that is not forgotten, and I hope that they don't try and negate those films, because to me, a lot of people have that argument, I grew up with the original Star Wars and whatnot, and therefore they overlook a lot of faults. Let's say in Return of the Jedi. Episode 4 and 5 to me, fantastic, but to me, while I'm a lot younger, I in fact grew up with the prequels, and I've revisited them, and I acknowledge their various flaws, but I still can't entirely say that I dislike them. In fact, I quite enjoy Episode 3 especially, and I enjoy all those films altogether. So hopefully this plotline isn't true, because there'll be a lot of explaining to do regarding the fact that the stormtroopers, they actually come across as clones nowadays. And finally, in the Star Wars universe, there's one more bit of news. That is that there were various set photos that were leaked by TMZ. And from these set photos alone, well, one is the practicality that I spoke about last time from that video that J.J. Abrams had made, that, they saw that one person walking around in the background and all of a sudden everyone jumps to practicality. Now, it's a little more acknowledgeable because they have this one gigantic creature that they've literally created that looks like a mix between a pig and it's the size of a rhinoceros, and it definitely looks like something, a very sluggish animal you're likely to find on, let's say, Tatooine. And to add to the fact that this could be Tatooine is the extremely desert-based location, and a lot of the sets, there's this sort of barrenness about it that, well, a lot of people are hoping for the grit of Star Wars to return, which, sure, I mean, I'm on board, but really, I get the impression that this is Tatooine, and I'm happy to see that they're going back to familiar locations, but at the same time, they're not going to particularly rely on the fact that, oh, this is Tatooine, because the reason that I'm able to make such a statement is because if you look at the costumes that some of the people are wearing, they're new. They don't look familiar to me. There's one in particular that has this kind of a star-shaped thing on top of someone's head who's wearing black, if I'm not mistaken. And I really think that they're not holding back. They're trying to bring in familiar aspects of the universe that we love, but not heavily rely on them. Again, that's heavily reading into what is just some mere set pictures, but hey, let's hope for the best. The next story that we have is about Thanos. For those of you who do not know, Thanos was, of course, in the after credits scene, or at least the mid credits scene of the Avengers, and he's set to be in Guardians of the Galaxy releasing August 1st, 2014, and he's finally been cast. And he is set to be the main villain in the Avengers 3. And he's supposed to be one of the most, brooding and just, he will pose the biggest threat to the Avengers that we will probably ever see, at least from whatever I've heard about the villain so far, and he will be played by Josh Brolin. Now, the fact that Josh Brolin has been set for this role, I have a lot of things to say. First off, again, there was a little more mentioned that Thanos might not have such a large role in Guardians of the Galaxy initially, and there was an addition according to HitFix, and they said that whatever happens in the Guardians universe, or their galaxy if you will, hasn't really reached Earth just as yet, or at least by the end of the film. So maybe there's more continuity with regards to Thanos' character, or maybe something towards the end that we'll get to know of how Thanos manages to, in fact, reach Earth and ultimately face off against the Earth's mightiest heroes. But now, the fact that Josh Brolin is playing him, I have two or three things to say. First off, I mean, Josh Brolin, in terms of voice modulation, which is something extremely essential if you're going to play, well, at least if you're going to provide your voice for a character, he's done a lot of varied voices, ranging from, you know, a Tommy Lee Jones impression in Men in Black 3 to George W. Bush in W, of course, and several other things along the way. And if you look at Thanos, here's the thing. I mean, this is not so much a theory. I can definitely read up more about this and even check. It could be a fact, if you will, but your facial features, you know, they kind of influence the kind of voice you have. Or at least they work in tandem with one another. So someone with, let's say, a larger jaw might have a relatively deeper voice. And if you take a look at Thanos, from that one little side image that we've seen, from the basic facial structure, I see a tidbit of a resemblance to that of Josh Brolin's. And if you listen to Josh Brolin's normal voice, he has that bit of a background crackle with it. So if he gets a little bit deeper, I think he might be able to execute a voice that I would certainly be looking forward to seeing, well, Thanos having. Now, the next story that we have is about the Hateful Eight. And for those of you who don't know, I'll quickly catch up. Alright, the Hateful Eight, the script had been sent out to a few actors. Some say it was Bruce Dern, and some say it was Christoph Waltz. We don't really know which actor's agent leaked the script. Quentin Tarantino was devastated. It was online. People had read it. And after, well, what he says was a tidbit of depression, he's come out and said that he's written a different ending, and he is going to make the film. There was, in fact, a live script read with some of the actors, and I'm so happy to see him go ahead with this. And now the cast has officially been announced. So first off, the story of the Hateful Eight, well, it takes place in a post-Civil War era that is in Wyoming, in fact, and it talks about a small group of stagecoach passengers, and they get stranded during a blizzard, and there are a lot of events that occur after that, and it's said that most of the events probably occur in a bar, which is interesting because the last film of Quentin Tarantino's that I can really remember where most of the events occur in one particular location was in fact Reservoir Dogs, and he did a fantastic job with that. And they say that the story includes a couple of bounty hunters that are set to be played by Samuel L. Jackson and in fact Kurt Russell, a Confederate general who's set to be played by Bruce Dern, a cowboy by Michael Madsen, an Englishman by Tim Roth, a soldier by Walton Goggins, and a female prisoner by Amber Tamblyn. Now, really looking at the cast for a second, while I am by no means surprised that Samuel L. Jackson is in this film, he's been in pretty much every Tarantino film. Even in Inglourious Basterds, he narrated for one or two scenes where narration was required. He and Tarantino, they have such a good rapport together. And I like it when directors, you know, they work again with different actors. And of course, I mean, when they work with familiar actors, you just have a bit more faith in the project, firstly. And secondly, the directors manages to tap into a few deeper aspects of these actors' talents. So Samuel L. Jackson is, of course, fantastic to have. And Bruce Dern, coming off his Oscar nomination for Nebraska last year, I mean, he, in fact, had a relatively small role, even if you could call it a cameo, if you will, in Django Unchained. So this is the first time that Bruce Dern and Quentin Tarantino are really going to, you know, collaborate on a much, much larger level. Looking at some of the other people in the film, you have Michael Madsen, who was in Reservoir Dogs and Kill Bill, Walton Goggins, who was in Django Unchained, Tim Roth, who is in Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, all the way back. He was Mr. Orange in Reservoir Dogs, if I'm not mistaken. And then you have Zoe Bell, who had a small role in Django Unchained, sure, but she was in fact a stunt woman for Kill Bill and Inglourious Basterds. So to really see all these frequent collaborators, along with a few new collaborators as well, working with a director who is of enormous talent in my personal opinion, it's something I'm looking forward to, and I'm glad that even the script leak, he managed to find a way around it because he has the brain to do so, that he managed to write in an ending, and I'm sure he will have that satisfying conclusion for each of the actors that I'm looking forward to this film, but I don't expect a release anytime before 2015. The next story we have is about Ant-Man. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ant-Man was supposed to be directed by Edgar Wright, and he dropped out of the project, and the news regarding this is getting worse, in my personal opinion, because Marvel movie news rarely tends to be bad. Either you have one of the greatest trailers to hit the web with Guardians of the Galaxy, either you have an announcement of a particular cast member, either you have set photos being leaked because everyone is so in love with the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point. But it's just the past couple of days, the news has not been positive at all. I mean, Edgar Wright left because of creative differences, and I'm sure that Marvel has this particular vision that they want to go on with, and the fact that they're sticking to that can be, the greener side of things, if you will. But there have been 3 directors in particular that have been recently considered for it. The first of which is Adam McKay, who's directed films like, Anchorman, Anchorman 2, The Other Guys, a lot of comedies, and they said he was going to be a part of the project, and I would have given him the chance. Marvel has given a couple of directors who might not have had the best of filmographies, but had faith in the project and whatnot to work on certain films. But Adam McKay is known for making straight-up comedies, and the Marvel films are a little wider in scope. Yes, they are hilarious at times, but really there's so much more with regards to action and larger set pieces that I don't know if a person like Adam McKay would be able to execute, and he dropped out. Think about that. This is the opportunity of the lifetime for him, and he probably said no. He said he's looking forward to the film. He hopes that he hopes for the best for Marvel. Maybe, okay, if he dropped out for the purpose of the fact that, excuse me, for the fact that he felt that he might not be able to tackle the project in a particular way or work with Marvel in a certain sense, that's fine. But if he left because he didn't like the project, that's not good news. That would not be good news at all. There are 2 other directors that they're looking at. The first is Ruben Fleischer, who, well, he was well known for Zombieland, post that he made 30 Minutes or Less in Gangster Squad. 2 films that were fun, but again, never really tried to reach certain heights that I believe Edgar Wright's Ant-Man could have. But now, since he's not directing it, there will be a certain flair of it that might be lost in considering the script changes and whatnot. But the director that Marvel seems to be looking at the most is Rawson Thurber, and his previous film that he had directed was Where Are the Millers, and I think to myself, I did not like that movie at all. Even some of the films prior to that aren't particularly well received, so I'm wondering what it is that Marvel sees in Rawson Thurber. He seems to be the current frontrunner at this point, and I'm getting skeptical about this project. This is the first, I was not even that skeptical about Guardians of the Galaxy, come to think of it. I had my issues considering this wild cast of characters, but, as I found out more and more about it, I was more excited. On the other hand, as I'm finding out more and more about Ant-Man, I'm starting to get less excited, which is not a good thing, but still, I have faith in the Marvel brand name. They're definitely going to deliver. The next story we have is about Avatar. Not just Avatar, well, technically it's Avatar 2, 3, and 4. James Cameron spoke about how the scripts are being written for this film, and I liked the genuine statement that he had to make, that they're sort of experimenting with a new form of writing, and I like it, because James Cameron always ventures out to do new things and to do, take a look at Avatar. The groundbreaking level of technology in that film itself. James Cameron is unafraid with experiments, and he seems to execute them well. And a lot of filmmakers experiment with different things, believe me. So him using the word experiment doesn't mean that, oh, he's just, lazy about the project or he doesn't care about it enough. Believe me, he's putting his life into Avatar right now. And this experiment seems interesting. What he's doing is he's hired 3 different script writers, all right? And each of them will be working individually on Avatar 2, Avatar 3, and Avatar 4. He will be working with them on each of those scripts. So he will be credited for writing Avatar 2, Avatar 3, and Avatar 4. The second writer will be, well, will keep changing. All right? So anyway, what he did was he sat down with them. He told them the entire story of Avatar 2, 3, and 4. And only after that did he tell them what film each of them had been hired to write with him, of course. So they all knew the story from 2 through 4, so they get a better sense of not just writing that individual script or story, but also for not having any continuity errors and for kind of linking it to other films of the universe. And I found this pretty interesting, but it can lead to a couple of issues. While yes, you have James Cameron working heavily on all 3 scripts, dividing attention like that, if he can keep up with it, because he says, you know, for 5 months of his life, 8 hours a day, they've been working on this. 5 months, 8 hours a day. That is commitment that you can buy. And really, if he's able to focus enough on each of them, on each of these days, then perfect. But it may be, because Avatar, the original Avatar, the script is where most people had the issue. I think they definitely want to improve on that, but at the same time, if he's dividing his attention amongst 3 different scripts, it may mean that the other writer could hold an almost equal amount of control on their particular script, thereby maybe keeping a bit of a lack of consistency in the films. While they will be shot together, they're not being written all by the same people. So the style of dialogue, the tone, the emotion of certain moments may come across differently. Something that we still have to worry about, but something that I think James Cameron, with the degree of professionalism that he has had throughout his life, something I'm not that apprehensive about. The next story we have is about Michael Giacchino and, well, him scoring another big film, that is Pixar's Inside Out. I first want to talk about Inside Out. It talks about the various, well, there are basically 5 characters that represent 5 different emotions within a child or a teenager's mind, and it stars people like Amy Poehler and Phyllis Smith and a slew of fantastic, talented people that I think can do a great job with their voice. And Michael Giacchino's been hired to do the score for this. I mentioned, in fact, in the first episode of the podcast, when he had been hired for Jurassic World, that he's done Star Trek Into Darkness, he's done Star Trek, he's done Mission Impossible 4, he's been hired to do Jurassic World, he's been hired for Brad Bird's Tomorrowland, he's done Ratatouille, The Incredibles, and of course he won an Oscar for Up. He's done quite a slew of things. He's done, in fact, 4 Pixar films so far. 2004's The Incredibles, 2007's Ratatouille, 2009's Up, which won the Oscar, and then 2011's Cars 2, which a lot of people weren't particularly happy with as a film, but the score is something I haven't particularly heard that much. Maybe I'll go back and listen to it. And I just have to say, it's always these extra and added on elements of the crew that can help in a larger collaborative process. Take a look at, let's say, X-Men Days of Future Past. I was apprehensive about Bryan Singer, but think about it. Had he hired a cinematographer that he wasn't used to working with, or had he hired an editor or composer that he wasn't used to working with, all of the elements might not have worked in tandem. Now, of course, he's working with Pete Docter, a director who, well, directed Up, the Academy Award-winning film, and the score in that is near perfect. And what we don't tend to realize is we don't think that, oh, a director directs the actors and whatnot. Sure, he does, but we don't think beyond that. A director is involved in pretty much every aspect of the film. It's the collaboration between the director and the other member of the crew that really manages to change the story from what is a bud to a flower, if you will. And I think that this frequent collaboration, as I mentioned earlier with Quentin Tarantino and his actors, this frequent collaboration of having Michael Giacchino back with Pete Docter and back to the genuine Pixar film, and even this film that could be fantastical in scope, is something that I'm definitely looking forward to and extremely optimistic about. The next story we have, it's a relatively smaller thing, if you will, but I mean, if you're a fan of Community, this is something that will make you happy. This is something that made me happy. For those of you who don't know, recently Community, in fact, after 5 seasons and 97 episodes, 3 short of the 100, got cancelled. It was having lots of issues with people leaving the show and, just really the creator getting fired for a season, then coming back. It was all over the place for Community. It was unfortunate. The stars didn't align, but the show may come back for one more season to Hulu. Some people were speculating Netflix, but now Hulu seems to be the one that's more likely going to give the go-ahead to Community because, of course, they have faith in the project. And Hulu realizes, well, if at all this is true, Hulu realizes that the people of Community, the show Community in and of itself, has this worldwide following. Because the numbers that most people tend to look at when it comes to whether a show should continue or not are the domestic numbers, that is in the US. If you look at the worldwide numbers, if there were a way of tracking a worldwide fan base, Community is probably far greater than some shows that are still running on TV right now. So it's good to bring back Community for a 6th season because, to live up to the old inside joke of 6 seasons in a movie, I think if the 6th season happens, creator Dan Harmon will manage to pull out all the stops and definitely go ahead with that movie. The next story, the next story is pretty much a recap of the box office. I did a full May 2014 box office overview. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description below. But let's just recap this past weekend. Maleficent opened to $69 million domestically, and for a worldwide total of about $170 million in 3 days. Why am I not surprised? Because of Disney. One thing sure, it has this almost universal demographic like an Alice in Wonderland. So it appeals to people of all ages. And it rides on the fact that, Sleeping Beauty was such a success. Granted, not everyone knows that Maleficent, and Sleeping Beauty, when you hear Maleficent, not everyone will register Sleeping Beauty in their head, but it's the Disney brand name. Because Disney does a fantastic, absolutely fantastic job when it comes to marketing and distributing their films. Which is why, Frozen broke the billion-dollar barrier, which is why Pixar films are nothing short of blockbusters, which is why The Avengers made $1.5 billion, and which is why I believe Maleficent has a long way to go in terms of the box office. Somewhere near 500 to 600 million, at least at this point. 500 million, it should definitely reach that amount, considering the massive opening it's had so far. Tripling its gross by the end of its run. I think it's going to do far better overseas because of the universal appeal, like I said. And, Maleficent's doing well. Angelina Jolie's another great face to have on that poster to really sell the film. And another film that released on the very same weekend, which opened to number 3, unfortunately, is A Million Ways to Die in the West. A film not doing as well as some might have expected. Opened to almost $17 million domestically. Foreign numbers we're still not 100% sure on just as yet, but I think it's the foreign territories that are going to have to save this film. Because if you take a look at Ted, I don't find Ted particularly the safe barometer to kind of measure A Million Ways to Die in the West against, but if really both films were riding on Seth MacFarlane. That's what it was. From the creator of Family Guy, we present Ted, and then from the creator of Family Guy and Ted, A Million Ways to Die in the West. So he is the soul, at the top. He's like the star on top of the tree, if you will. So Ted made $545 million worldwide. A box office success, opening to $54 million on opening weekend. with A Million Ways to Die in the West opening to about a third or even less than a third of that so far. Domestically, $100 million is probably not even likely. 60 to 70 seems like the reasonable mark. It's the foreign territories that could still push this film to about $200 plus million worldwide. I think it's still a possibility. While it's going to be difficult, it's going to be a stretch considering the word of mouth which pushed Ted all the way. The word of mouth that is so important nowadays, that pushes films like Frozen to being the fifth highest grossing film of all time, that pushes films like Gravity to making $750 million. Word of mouth is not on the side of A Million Ways to Die in the West. It's got 30-something% on Rotten Tomatoes. The reviews aren't so great. I personally haven't seen it yet. I'm still going to go into it with an open mind. But really, I think at this point in time, it's going to have a little bit of a rough time at the box office. And the final film I want to talk about at the box office, X-Men Days of Future Past. What I believe was, in fact, if you look at the expectations, the budget, and everything from a box office perspective, X-Men Days of Future Past was, in a sense, the most successful. It's currently grossed over $500 million worldwide. $500 million, on its way to getting $200 million plus domestic, and probably even $650 worldwide by the end of its run. It's really been out for just under 2 weeks. Under 2 weeks, $500 million gross. You have a long way to go. X-Men Days of Future Past is already ahead of the prior highest grossing film. It's now the highest grossing film, but it beat out the earlier champion that was X-Men 3 The Last Stand, which had $459 million. So you have to realize that this film is massively important for, I wouldn't say the resurgence of the franchise, but if your highest grossing film for, the 14-year franchise was in the 6th or 7th year of the franchise running, and now when you have the addition of things like 3D with the Wolverine and, the massive inflation and whatnot, you'd expect films to gross more and more and more. But it's the quality that towards the middle portion of it kind of deteriorated before X-Men First Class came back. So in a sense, X-Men Days of Future Past is really going to help the X-Men franchise, at least from a film perspective, really just blow up. And maybe become someday soon as popular as the Avengers or even as Batman or the Justice League. Now, let's take a quick preview into the films coming out this weekend, the first of which is Edge of Tomorrow, a film that I'm actually really looking forward to. It's based on a novel called All You Need Is Kill by Hiroshi Sakurazaka. It's a Japanese novel, and it's directed by Doug Liman. Now, Doug Liman as a director, he's made, Jumper and Mr. and Mrs. Smith and The Bourne Identity. And those films, sure, they all have they bear their fruit when it comes to the directing standpoint. But still, as a director, things like establishing characters, maybe making changes in the script, I don't know if he went all that deep into. But what I'm hearing about Edge of Tomorrow, which is a film that, by the way, stars Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, both headlining the film. And in this film, basically what happens is there's some kind of virtual world which Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt have to go into, in which they have to relive the same situation over and over and over again, much like in Source Code, if you will, in order to really just solve a particular problem. What I love is that we don't know everything about it. The tagline itself is live, die, repeat. Pretty much explaining everything you need to know before going into the film. And I'm satisfied by the fact that I don't have anything ruined for me, really. I've seen all the trailers so far because it looked like an interesting film. But I have my apprehensions in the sense that it has that kind of a feel wherein it's an interesting concept. It feels like it could lead towards the interesting concept, not so perfect execution kind of film. But if I take a look at, let's say, the Rotten Tomatoes score, while, yes, Rotten Tomatoes, I have disagreed with the tomato meter hundreds of times in my life, with 95% currently, 95%, that is something you cannot just, turn a blind eye to. A lot of the reviews are saying that it is perhaps the surprise of the year, or at least the summer so far. So, I'm going to go into this with an open mind. I'm looking forward to seeing what Edge of Tomorrow has to present, because Edge of Tomorrow could, range from a slightly forgettable film like, maybe Oblivion, and last year's, in fact, Tom Cruise film was like, or it could really, stick with people in terms of the concept and maybe years down the line be looked at as a really interesting science fiction film. The other film coming out this weekend is The Fault in Our Stars, based off a fantastically famous novel. And really, the thing is, I'm looking forward to it. It's got Shailene Woodley, who has really, proven herself with some of her recent work. Even in Divergent, I thought she was great. And The Fault in Our Stars, it tells the story of a woman named Hazel being portrayed by Shailene Woodley, who's a cancer patient and is forced by her mother to kind of go into, those support groups for therapy and whatnot. And she meets a man named Augustus, who also has a particular, life-threatening disease. And it's sort of a love story between them. And this kind of material, considering how well received the book has been, if handled right, can again be, can prove itself like The Spectacular, Now, or About Time, or films like that. It can really stick with people. And I think that releasing in June it's not a bad thing. It's getting a slightly wide release. Granted, it's going up against Edge of Tomorrow, but I still think that The Fault in Our Stars, the reception behind the book is strong enough for, it to have a pretty decent box office opening. And I think that, and I hope enough people actually check it out. And one interesting observation. In this film, we have Shailene Woodley playing, as I said, Hazel, who's the female in the story. And the lead male is being played by a man called Ansel Elgort. For those of you who don't know, Ansel Elgort played Caleb Pryor in Divergent, who is in fact, the brother of Shailene Woodley's character. And they were brother and sister in that film. Now they're playing lovers. It was just an interesting thing that, someone brought up earlier, wherein you have Elizabeth Olsen and Aaron Taylor Johnson, who were husband and wife in the new Godzilla, and now they're going to be playing, in fact, twin brother and sister. So I'm curious to see if that kind of chemistry, working with one kind of relationship, can it carry on in the right manner, of course, into your next film? Or is it something hard to get away from, especially considering the fact that the brother and sister aspect is in a large franchise that is Divergent, and you're going to have Insurgent and Allegiant coming out very soon. Finally, I wanted to talk about Blu-ray. I'm a big fan of Blu-ray, as you know, and this week has a lot of interesting Blu-ray stuff coming out. And of course, there was a bit of news about Captain America the Winter Soldier. The Blu-ray is coming out September 9th, so look forward to that. I'm going to pick it up, of course, and much like all of the other Marvel films, there are two editions. There's the 3D plus 2D edition, which is probably a 2-disc edition, including a digital copy, unless they include the DVD, which will make it a 3-disc edition. And then you're going to have your either single disc or 2-disc, but definitely 2D edition along with a digital copy. And some of the special features that they spoke about really, they're the same when it comes to all Marvel films, pretty much. In all your Marvel Blu-rays, probably since the Avengers, you get your blooper reel, you get a making-of featurette, you get your deleted scenes, and you get your Marvel one-shot. But the announcement this time was that the Winter Soldier will not be having that one-shot. And while, okay, it's not like I look forward to the Blu-ray to, I have to watch that one-shot. No, I pretty much love the Marvel films. In fact, I own every film of the cinematic universe so far, because I've enjoyed them quite a bit. While, of course, some I've enjoyed more than others, I really enjoyed them, so I definitely picked them up, and I don't look forward to them because of, I need to see the one-shot. But at the same time, certain one-shots have really inspired confidence in certain things. Take a look at the one-shot on the Iron Man 3 Blu-ray. Agent Carter. That was fantastic, and that is something I believe that actually inspired that actually inspired the TV show to get picked up. So Similarly, the one shot on Thor: The Dark World, which is where you have the link to the Mandarin. While I don't think that any of that is going to have any repercussions in the cinematic universe, it's called All Hail the King, if I'm not mistaken, and it's certainly just interesting to see, like, because one shot, in fact, where that comes from is from the comic books. There were certain comic books that were singular storylines called one-shots that didn't have any additions coming out further on. They were just that one-off story that Marvel wanted to tell from the comic books. So they were inspired by that. And now on the Blu-rays, they're releasing them. And I think that's a fantastic idea for the fans to really, just give them that extra treat that they yearn for, to really have that goodwill that Marvel has had. And while there is no one-shot, it's not the most shockingly or devastating news, but I'm just saying what the one-shots have done to inspire confidence in something like an Agent Carter TV show, it might not harm Marvel to have them as often as possible. Furthermore, to add to the Blu-ray talk, we have the Breaking Bad complete series coming out in a whopping 16-disc edition Blu-ray. And of course, remember, when I say Blu-ray, I talk about, Blu-rays and DVDs for certain things, but I don't know if this particular edition is going to be releasing on DVD as well. While I'm sure the release dates will probably coincide with the DVD. So, it's coming out this week. It's something, if you were a fan of the show, you have to look forward to. I actually, don't kill me, I have not finished the show. I've seen some episodes. I've seen one episode, let's be honest. I liked it. I think as I get into the later episodes, it'll pick up speed and I'll really get into the show and fall in love with it. But even that first episode to me was something pretty great. So I'm definitely looking forward to watching the remaining episodes. Furthermore, again, more TV on Blu-ray, Workaholics Season 4. I'm a big fan of Workaholics, and while I thought towards the end of the third season and the beginning of the fourth season, I'm not saying that the show got different. I'll say that the show got a bit more extreme, which, if you followed the show through its entirety, is something that you will actually manage to appreciate. It's not a show for everyone, but if it is for you, you will be head over heels with Workaholics. And Season 4, it's already been extended for a 5th season, probably going to air next year or towards the end of this year. I think more than likely next year, though, so if you're a fan of Workaholics, definitely pick up Season 4 on Blu-ray. All the seasons are out so far. It's a good buy. The audio and picture quality, from certain reviews I've read online, of course, seems to be improving as the seasons go along. Now, from the films, well, we have more new releases. The main one is, in fact, Lone Survivor. Lone Survivor was a film that, it had a limited release last year and released in a large number of theaters nationwide this year on January 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. I'm surprised I remember that, and I loved it. I thought it was a great movie. While yes, some people say it was getting a bit too preachy or patriotic to a certain extent, I thought that the story that it delivered was heartfelt and absolutely intense. Like, if you liked the last 30 minutes or so of Zero Dark 30, or if you like Zero Dark 30 in general, because of the fact that it's based on a true story and the kind of source material that it's, or the kind of material that's attacking, Lone Survivor might just be up your alley. I can't guarantee that it will, but it might just be. And a lot of people I know love this film, and I think that Lone Survivor was one of last year's surprises. Edge of Tomorrow could be a surprise this year. Lone Survivor was definitely one of last year's absolutely most pleasant surprises. Two films that haven't been so pleasantly received, unfortunately. The first of which is RoboCop, is also coming out on Blu-ray. This is the 2014 edition, of course. And now look, if you are a die-hard fan of the RoboCop franchise, you might actually hate this film more, but you might also be more inclined to pick it up on Blu-ray. Because, if you're a collector and whatnot, I get it, alright? Some people have that kind of thing within them where they have every film, and they don't want to skip over or gloss over one film in the, entire series. But really, RoboCop, I don't think that it was that great a film, and I don't necessarily think that you have to buy it. And the last, big release that we have coming out on Blu-ray is Son of God. Now, I haven't yet seen Son of God. I did not want to watch the film because of what I heard it really was. While, okay, I'm not trying to go against any particular religion in terms of that sense of the content, but I heard that there was a mini series that aired on TV called The Bible, and they just cut out everything that didn't have Jesus in it, and they pretty much edited it to be the story of the Son of God, that is Jesus Christ, and make that a 2 hour and 45 minute film. So it's really confusing. I think, this might not do so well because most people who would have enjoyed Son of God enough would probably end up wanting to pick up the Bible miniseries as a whole. But really, if you like the film, I haven't yet seen it. A lot of people have been, they've had their issues with it, but they enjoyed it to a certain extent. I think that you should definitely pick it up. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening in. We've crossed about 45 minutes. That's a lot of, non-stop talking on my part. A lot more coming out in the world of film, in the upcoming months. I'm actually looking forward to Transformers 4. That's weird, but that's also kind of true. And Guardians of the Galaxy and all kinds of things to look forward to. I've been having so much fun doing this, still catching up on, earlier films to still review, still have quite a stock of them to really catch up on. I had a busy beginning of this year, but I'm going to make sure I finish all of them soon enough, and I'm going to make sure that I'm up to date with each and every film when I review it for you guys, because I do this for you guys. I love doing it. Initially I did it for myself. Then I got a response. Then I started doing it for you guys. And now doing it for you guys, in a sense, gives me a sense of happiness. So it's just this kind of, cycle, this really positive cycle that I've gotten into. So I really like doing it. And of course, I have to check out Maleficent and A Million Ways to Die in the West and a lot of the new releases as well. I will be doing all that. I will be getting into all of it. And a couple of Blu-ray pickups that I did that I'd also like to talk about just to add to this Blu-ray section. I finally bought American Hustle. I was not able to find it anywhere. Well, my PlayStation actually has this region-based issue, so getting one with the right region code was a really big problem. I finally got American Hustle. It was my favorite film of last year. If you haven't seen the Snubby Movie Awards, it actually won Best Picture. It's my own award show, of course, and I love that film to no end. And a film that came out 25 years prior that I also love. That's probably my favorite film of that year. Then again, I haven't seen too many films from 1998. That's Die Hard. I never had Die Hard on Blu-ray. I'm just as shocked as you are. I finally got it. And really, that's it. That's all that's been happening. Otherwise, I've been enjoying doing all of this. And I really look forward to next week's show of This Week in Movies. I'm glad I can call this a podcast. I'm kind of rambling on as I always do. I know I don't know how to end these things. So let's just end it with this really awkward pause. Yeah.